So I'm thrilled to have a very unique speaker with us today, and I'd like to introduce her just a little bit. You'll clearly hear her expertise, but just let me give you a little background about her. Her and her partner and their company Distill bring about 20 years of deep consumer sector expertise, following careers as investment analysts on Wall Street, in which they invested thousands of hours in identifying early, long-tail consumer trends that impact business models and competitive landscapes. Distill helps companies unlock growth by using a unique combination of independent insights, categorical knowledge, consumer and economic data, and a collaborative, creative approach to a long-term business strategy. She is the CEO and chief whiteboard artist, an insights and advisory company to C-suites and boards. She's considered a consumer behavior expert with insights that span all demographics and across all key areas of discretionary spending. Career awards include top sell-side analyst in the Wall Street Journal Best on the Street Analyst Survey in 2006 and 2011 for coverage in broad line and apparel retailers. So please welcome Neely Tamminga.
Thank you for having me today, and Chum, thank you so much for hosting, and Rick. Kayla and I, my business partner Kayla is right here. Kayla, say hi to everyone. She's my 50% equity partner. We're doing this together, and it's one of the greatest joys of my life, launching this new business following a Wall Street career. But it was scary. It was super, super scary because, honestly, I've spent my 8,760 hours, on Wall Street and not networking because I was busy doing other things, right? And Rick's one of the first people I reached out to because I was like, Rick, startup, I don't know. I'm just going to reach out to him and see if he'll take my call. And he did, and spent quite a bit of time right out of the gate challenging us with some great insights. So I believe in Clubby. I believe in what you guys are doing. I believe in this networking, and I've been on the other side of it. So that's an open invitation. Like if you see anyone in my LinkedIn network, you're like, I need to get hooked up with so-and-so, I'll do it, okay? Like I know the benefit of that right now, so I will absolutely do it, okay? It's the open invitation. So just wanted to start a little bit with just asking, the question, have you wondered kind of a little bit of what's really going on with our economy, right? It feels like it should be a little bit more robust than it is, and it's not. And it's that question that really has, where Kayla and I have spent a lot of our time over the last couple months. And so we want to share some of our insights with you. So mindful consumption is what we're calling it today. As I mentioned, my business partner Kayla and I, we left a Wall Street job. And what we did as stock analysts, yeah, you pick stocks, and yeah, you help advise money managers into putting the right dollars in the right calls. That's what you do, right? And hopefully you just do it better than average so that you can stay employed, and you don't want to do it too well because then the SEC calls, right? So this is how this works. And so, to do that well, you have to, and legally, right, which is well and legally would define me, okay? You have to go really early into understanding what those early trends are going to be, because that's the only way you'll ultimately have credibility, is training your mind to get early with those insights. And we enjoyed that aspect of our job so much, and found ourselves being invited into more and more boardrooms, that it gave us a taste as to what it is that we can do for people. And what we found is both CEOs and boards really want a Switzerland, someone to come in with independent insights to help facilitate that conversation on really difficult things, like what does it mean for Amazon to buy Whole Foods, And they can read headlines, or we can debate that point, with some grounded insights and data. That's what we do. That's what we do at Distill. We advise those guys. All right, so we were given the gift of time. This is now, here we go. Is this working? It's not working. It's not working. It says it's working. Is it working on the laptop? Oh. This is fun. Here, just give us 1 minute. Promise it'll be worth it. Okay. What we were given, though, as we were doing our strategy shift here, oh, here we go, I got it, is we were given the gift of time, and that's what we're giving back to you guys. This is my contact information. You can find me on LinkedIn, though, whatever. I'll respond, I'll call. I've already asked a couple of you to reach out to me to follow up on a few things. Please do. We have time right now, so it's good. This is my legal slide. When I was on Wall Street, I had 4. Now I have it down to 1 because it's a lot like the book, right? If you give a moose a muffin, you give a mouse a cookie, you give a lawyer a phone call, they will definitely find an hour to spend to make a legal slide. And since my insurance guy for errors and omissions happens to be right there at that table, I need to make sure I'm showing my legal slide of disclosures and disclaimers. That's Chris Bealey. He also happens to be the husband of my best friend, so that works out well for us. Interestingly, fun little story about Chris. I'm totally going to poke fun at you a little bit, but I'll pay you back in tequila later. Chris calls me up, and he's like, starts chuckling, and he said, I almost forwarded you something. And it was the invitation for this talk. He said, I was ready to hit send, and then I realized, oh, you're the speaker. I was thinking, this is something Neely would really enjoy. So it tells you he's a good listener as well as a thoughtful guy. So anyway, Chris, there you go. Thanks for helping me warm up the crowd. All right, so there's our contact information. What are we gonna do today? We're gonna actually talk through the economy. I'm gonna set up what the consumer economy is from our perspective. We're gonna talk a little bit about capacity and proclivity. Okay, we're gonna define between those two. But where I'm heading with this, where I'm taking you, is that our nation, we believe, is set up to become a nation headed towards more mindful consumption, more frugality. It's really going to be ushered in by millennials. And it's important to understand why that is, because only with the why can you actually come up with an action plan, right? Okay. We'll have lots of time for Q&A, by the way, too. All right, so let's get into it. How is the economy? On paper, it's stellar, okay? Like if you look at the paper view of what our economy is, it's stellar. I'm gonna walk you through why people say that. But there's 2 basic questions we ask. It's super simple. I'm like, the girl who studied economics and finance, but was also like a cheerleader in AP math. I need to understand both sides of life, okay? There's 2 questions we always ask of the economic data. Do consumers have cash? And do they want to spend it? It's 2 very, very basic questions. But behind those questions are economic data points. You have employment, wages. That's like the consumer's income statement. We all know what an income statement is in here, right? Revenues less expenses equal your profits. Well, the revenue side for the consumer is jobs and wages. The expenses side would be things like gas prices, food costs, right? That's your income statement view. The income statement view of the economy is actually pretty good. Then you have your balance sheet, your assets, right? You have your house values, stock market, right? These are things that we're somewhat familiar with, retirement plans. Those go into capacity conversations, right? Proclivity, though, do they want to spend it, and on what do they want to spend? That is where we've spent the better part of 20 years of marrying art and science. That is really difficult for any economist to truly come down and tell you this is how the consumer wants, how they're feeling and how they want to spend. So a lot of headlines and news, if you step back, are focused on the capacity. There isn't a lot out there on proclivity. That's actually what we spend our time on. But the 2 together is how you come up with consumer spending. All right, so let's look at the capacity side. Do not glaze over if economics is not your thing. I promise we're gonna make this fun, okay? Because I like having happy crowds. All right, there's 2 things you've got going on. Jobs on the left and wages on the right. Like most things in life, you want things to go up and to the right, right? That's a happy chart in economic lands. When you go from up and to the right, that's typically what you want, or in your case, this side, right? We are at all-time high employment. You guys have jobs. We have employment recruiters in here. You know how difficult it is probably to place people because we are at very low unemployment levels pretty much in the economy. Wages, however, have not been terribly spectacular, okay? When you look at it economically speaking, it's kind of a flat rate, right? It's going sideways. It's not totally bad, but it's not great. It's a lot like, Goldilocks, not too hot, not too cold, just is. But you can't make an assessment on the consumer's income statement by looking at just jobs or just wage. You have to look at them together. A lot like average unit retail price and units per transaction. If you're in retail, you need to look at both, the whole transaction. It's the same in the economy. So what we do is we actually combine these two and come up with something that we call labor force income. It's looking at jobs and wage rates together to come up with that overall revenue income stream. When you do that in a post-recession era, what you're looking at here is that labor force income growth was up 3.9% in 2016. The post-recession average is 4. It's basically in line. It's good. It's not hot. It's not bad. It's good. It's 4%. 4% top line. That's not bad, right? I would take 4% more money today. That's good. All right, so jobs are good. That's good. Right. Assets, look at assets, the balance sheet side. Who here owns a home, right, or a condo, or place of dwelling, right? Practicing your arm raising moves, because we're gonna do this a couple times. There we go, all right. It helps digest food, okay. Who here has a retirement fund, mutual funds, 401k, 503c(b), I don't even know, all these things, right? Yeah, you all have them. You're doing well, okay? Your house prices are really good, that's good. It's up and to the right. Your stock market, up and to the right. I can't explain it. I've never been more grateful that I'm currently not on Wall Street and have to explain why the stock market's as hot as it is right now. Super glad. You can try to ask me later. I'll probably sidestep that question. But it's good. So the consumer's balance sheet's feeling really good. Their income is really good. So consumer spending must be good. Jobs good, assets good, spending good, spending not good. Okay, what you're looking at here is the consumer spending measurement called real personal consumption expenditures. It's what our economists use to basically explain consumer spending. Consumer spending is 2/3 of our overall economy. That's the typical way to think about it. The 68-year average is 3.3% growth. Last quarter, we were up 2.8. So we're at all-time high stock market, all-time high employment. But we're not even hitting the average on consumer spending. There's something else going on in our economy. Maybe it's confidence, right? Kind of a trying time, politically speaking. I'm not going to talk about the sides of politics in where I land. But let's just say my Facebook feed looks like a war zone, okay? I have friends on both sides, and I'm like, wow, Aunt Carla, I'm not really sure you should be posting these things, right? But she's 70, so what are you gonna say? Okay, so, it's just not a happy time out there, right, from a confidence perspective. So maybe confidence has been impacting spending, right? Wrong. Confidence is on the rise, all-time highs, post-election. Confidence has been moving up. It tricked back a little bit last month, which was reported last week, but still it's in the mid to high 90s. I mean, these are good numbers. These are really good confidence numbers. So jobs are good, assets are good, confidence is good, spending is not good. But anyone in the retail industry would know that because, as depicted here, the population has been largely underperformers and not outperformers. This is the holiday tally sheet. Q1 really didn't get too much better. You still have more people underperforming. All-time high jobs, assets are great, stock market's great, confidence is good, spending is not there. This is where Kayla and I spent a lot of our time this spring just digging into this and really investing the time. The best thing about startups, doing a startup, well, I could talk a lot about this. So far, I'm living it, right? Is the phone doesn't ring as much. And some people would freak out about that out of the gate. I loved it, okay? I got to just be with my thoughts and do my work and be focused on one task and not get pulled into many different tasks. Could you all just imagine right now if your phone didn't ring, and you didn't have texts you had to answer and emails you didn't have to answer? People kept on asking us, are you gonna take time off? Are you gonna go on vacation? I'm like, I'm gonna enjoy silence. That's what I'm gonna do. So that's what we did. So our first sign in this journey of figuring out this breakdown between spending and what was going on with spending, our first sign that something was wrong was this breakdown in relationship between confidence and consumer spending. So you've seen the confidence chart high. You've seen the spending chart not so great. Let me tell you something about the relationship between confidence and spending. You can go back and see a mathematical relationship that goes back really, 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 really far. That how you feel in month 1 is how you show up and spend in month 5, about 86% of the time. That's the long-term relationship, mathematical relationship between confidence and then spending. But if you dig into the data over the last 2 years, there's no relationship between confidence and spending. It is completely broken down. It doesn't act. Some months it'll be up, some months it'll be down, depending on what's going on with confidence. So that's our first sign that there's something different, something else going on with the economy. What's going on? What's going on with consumer? So we dig into that and we thought, okay, well maybe there's just more expenses, right? Maybe there's something going on the expense side of the equation. Remember, because it's revenues less expenses equal your net income. So maybe there's something going on in expenses. So we dug into that a little bit. Well, when you look at kind of the expenses that you routinely spend, like gas every day, right, food every day, those actually have been benefits to the consumer, not negatives of late. Those have been benefits, not negatives. Well, then healthcare. We all know about the rising cost of healthcare. Maybe it's healthcare. Well, healthcare expenses have been going on since like 2012, okay, in terms of its step up relative to the consumer. And healthcare expenses, as anyone, a business owner knows here, you're sharing in that pain between corporate and consumer. It's not just on the consumer. So it's not new, I guess is our point. Like, yes, it's an expense, but it's not new expense relative to what's happened over the last couple years. So then Kayla and I were sitting in our little artist loft, which is, we actually office out of an artist loft, which is so fun because then you're around like people with like tattoos and piercings and like not finance people. And they ask you like, hey, what do you do? We're like, we're just gonna keep walking. Okay, no, it's fine. And we're sitting in the artist loft and Kayla starts to share stories with me about some of her friends and what's going on in their lives and student debt. And she's sharing with me really large student debt repayments that some of her friends are going through. I will say here and very clear, this girl does not have any student debt because that's how amazing she is. Okay, yay for that, yay for Kayla. But her friends do. And so we decided to dig into that a little bit. We found some interesting things when we did something, when we dug into the student debt. So let me share this with you. Okay, this is just a picture of student debt. This is the time when this is not good, when it goes up and to the right. Okay, this is not good. This is a not good increase. Okay? Student debt has actually been up 5-fold, 5 times since 2003. Healthcare costs, 1.4 times. Student debt obligations up 5 times. Healthcare, 1.4. Okay, this is a very big deal. So Kayla and I are looking at each other and we're going, oh my gosh, we didn't even study this before. What's going on? Like, why are people not talking about this? Why are people not writing about this? Why do people not realize that this is a very big deal? You know, and what does this look like in the consumption expenditure survey? You know, because the government puts out a lot of great data, which is great for startups, right? We found that the government is not actually including student debt repayment in the consumer expenditure survey data. So that 2.8% would actually be even lower if you had to factor in the offset of student debt repayment. Think I'm crazy? I was on the phone with the Bureau of Economic Analysis earlier this year, talking to them about why that is. They collect the data, they do not actually report the data. The only place that we've been able to get the data is actually through the New York Fed Reserve. That's kind of interesting. And it only goes back to 2003. I can give you retail sales by 11 different categories back to 1929, okay? Like the government loves data. They love to collect data. Student debt data only exists back to 2003. So what has this impact possibly been to retail sales? We've discussed our economy's GDP, right? 2/3 of that is the consumer. Half of that consumer portion is retail sales, reported retail sales. That's how that math works. 100% of the economy, 2/3 consumer. Of that 2/3, half is retail sales. It's like $5 trillion or something, give or take, billions. What has the impact been? If you look at student debt obligations, or repayment, not even just the obligations, the repayment, it was about a 70 basis point headwind to 2003 as retail sales. It climbed up to 220 basis points. What does that mean? I'll translate, fancy math to real math, right? Retail sales were up 3.3% on a reported basis last year, like the big dog number, the $5 trillion number, right? It would have been up 5.5% if we didn't actually have to pay back student debt. The difference between 3.3 and 5.5, bonuses, people not getting laid off, right? Kayla would probably let me buy something other than Kirkland's private label K-Cups, right? She's a frugal CFO too, by the way. It's great. It's a big deal. 2.2% on our economy is a very big deal, and not enough people are talking about it. I think it's important for me to just sidestep right now and say this is not an advertisement to say we're not supposed to pay back our student debts or debts in general. That's not what the comment is. It's much more to say there's an impact to this. There's a capacity issue. So student debt is a very big deal, but as I mentioned, it is only capacity that we're talking about. Do they have cash? Right? Do they have cash? They have a lot less because of debt. Now let's talk through what do they want to spend if they even do have cash, the proclivity side of that equation. But before I do, I just want to check in a little bit. I realize I'm throwing a lot of economic data at people, and I geek out at this stuff. I was the last girl picked in gym class. I finally paid off in some career, which is awesome, right? But I just want to make sure, are we, let me ask, let's practice the hand raising. All right, do you understand that spending should be stronger because of jobs and job creation on paper? Okay, all right, good, thank you. Let's ask here, retail sales. You understand how there's been an impact because of student debt to the retail sales number and how big that number is to the economy? You understand that? Okay. Who here thinks I'm going to start talking about how millennials are massively frugal? Spoiler alert, I am. Okay, this matters. Now let's get a little bit more of the why, though, behind it, right? Let's talk a little bit more about the why. We talked about capacity. Let's talk about proclivity. Capacity, again, is science, it's math, it's something that you can calculate. Proclivity is harder to do. So we're going to add something, right, to our equation. Capacity, student debt is a headwind. Now we're going to add, on proclivity, hardwired brain science, because I don't know of a snappy one-word way of saying this, okay? Hardwired brain science is another reason why we're going to have very frugal consumers. Okay. But before we do that, we need to review a few things about our generations. All right, do we generally understand that there's 6 basic generational buckets in the US economy, right? The oldest group, so the parents of the baby boomers, the grandparents of the Xers, right? I'm an Xer. I was born the year that was the least amount of people born. Then I was born in Naples, so no one was born that week, probably, in Naples County Hospital. GI generation, they're 93 plus. They're the oldest group. They're barely with us still, right? But we love them because they were our grandparents. Baby boomers, probably have a lot of baby boomers in this room. Just statistically speaking, we probably should. You guys are a fun bunch. You like to spend a lot. That's good. Okay, Gen X, very few of us. Gen Y, right? These are the millennials. It gets used interchangeably. If you're wondering who the Gen Y and millennials are, let me just dispel all concerns. They're the same people. Yeah, please.
So you just said baby boomers like to spend a lot.
They did. They do. They did.
But how do you delve into that number when comparing it to the millennials who simply don't have capacity? Whereas they didn't have student debt, they had greater discretionary income.
Right.
You're saying something very subjective about that particular generation compared to the millennial generation, which may not necessarily bear out, given it's a capacity constraint you're making a point about.
I love the way your mind works because we're going to be talking about exactly that data that proves that out. So thank you. And if I'm not answering that, will you come back to me? Okay, I appreciate that. Because you're asking exactly the right question. Okay. So here's Gen Z. These are like basically the children of the Xers at this point, and maybe some of the older millennials. There's a lot of people out there who will tell you they know everything about Gen Z. Gen Z, at their oldest age, is 21. They have no idea who they are at this point. So don't overpay for that marketing advice just yet. Okay, all right. Okay, so why does this matter? Because if you look at the US economy, we're basically a two-humped camel, right? Where bimodal distribution is the fancy term. You've got a lot of boomers, and you got a lot of Gen Yers, right, on the adult consumption years, but very few Xers. So it's just, that's the way it looks. And we have population, we have age there. But how you go from demographics to generations is through experiences. That's I love the head nod. I totally agree with you on this. I think you and I are gonna be like best friends back there. But that's how you go to become defining a generation. And so, but what years, what experiences? At Distill, we've developed this thesis, you know, and it's maybe pokeable, I don't know, but I think it works pretty well, that we think there's this magical age range between 16 and 22 years old. And let me explain to you why that is. 0 to 25, your brain is basically still creating gray matter, right? It's still figuring out what it is. It can be chemically imprinted. It can be experientially imprinted. I am not a neuroscientist. I don't even know how to say that word, right? However, I read a lot, and I read a lot of studies. And I've been reading a lot of studies this spring about how our brains are impacted. So we're all concerned about the kids on digital devices all the time, right? You should, because they're actually getting chemically imprinted while that's happening. Okay, there's a pragmatic reason why we have to care about screen time. So that's happening 0 to 25, right? But it doesn't matter. Mom and dad can keep you inside pretty much, right? We can try to protect them as much as possible. And then they get their license, and they turn 16, and then they go to college, and they go through 22. Their awareness of the world goes far beyond what we can control. Let me give you a good example, pragmatic example. In kindergarten, we all learned what George Washington never told a lie. By the time you're in college, you learn a few things more about George Washington, okay? So your awareness of the world evolves as you age. Seems simple enough. That intersection between rising awareness and brain development is 16 to 22. That's where we come up with this range of 16 to 22. Why does this matter, Neely? Well, because when you actually go through each one of these generations and look at what was going on when that generation's peak population was 16 to 22, you learn some very interesting patterns. Millennials and GI generation had very similar experiences. They both saw significant economic duress during 16 to 22. GI generation, depression. Millennials, Gen Y, recession. They experienced significant economic duress as their awareness was expanding and their brains were still forming. We think they're actually they're hardwired for financial anxiety at worst and financial vigilance at best when you do that. Interestingly, though, it doesn't stop there. We've actually compared the economies for each one of these. So going back to your asking about spending and how does it look and what do the economies look like for each one of those years of influence across the 6 different buckets of demographics, what you'll basically see in this data is some generations have experienced good and bad economies, but the GI generation and millennials, a la the Gen Y group, really didn't have robust economies during their years of influence, okay? GDP is like basically the total revenue of our economy. That's kind of the best way. If you're in here wondering like, what is GDP? And I wish you would explain it to me. That's what it is. It's basically the make of our entire economy. It's revenue. You want it to go higher. But millennials actually take the real cake when you look at the numbers of depressive cake, that is. Their peak GDP growth that they experienced during their years of influence was 2.7%. Like, they've never gotten to the average of 30.4. If you've ever wondered, if you employ millennials and you've ever wondered, I keep on offering them more incentives and reasons to do more. Why do they not take those incentives and apply themselves so that they can get more economic benefits? Because they've never figured out what a carrot-stick economy is. It's never mattered to them. It's not in their wiring, particularly the recessional millennials. There's an older millennial group. They're smaller in size. The larger size is the recessional group. Thing that's interesting, oh yeah, please.
I wanted to ask about that older millennial group. So, and I don't know where you get your data and different places cut off, but you've got a 1977 date as the start point. So really, if you think about 16 to 22, they were 16 to 22, they were 22 in 1999.
Right.
So that, like, the 90s was this boom. So for the older millennials, they got hardwired differently, like for this
Correct.
really interesting premise that I've never heard before that I'm really interested in.
Yes.
But so that's what I wanted to ask about.
To bridge that,
We population adjust that 16 to 22. So what we're showing you is where the peak population was, so the largest amount of influencers of that economy, because there are huge spreads.
So that's what you're saying about the older versus the bold.
Exactly. So the older have a very different experience than the younger recessional millennials, but I have to tell you, the bulk of them are the student debt strapped recessional millennials. But your math is 100% correct. Yeah.
That makes perfect sense because for years I've thought that, okay, if I'm a millennial, I may start my career before the recession. So it's a very different experience than that. I think for
Yeah.
I mean, I'm great.
Yeah, no, you're lucky. You're very lucky that way. Another interesting, it's not on these charts, but just, more facts behind the data, right? Both those recessional millennials, the larger population, as well as GI generation, they're also the only two demographic groups that saw unemployment double in under 6 months, okay? So you can start ticking through some of the other external factors that were going on. We have a whole white paper dedicated to this topic, that's behind our knowledge library for our clients. This is what we do. Just giving you like a little bit of a sneak peek of some of the stuff that we do. But they've seen their parents lose jobs. They've seen their house values diminish. They've seen their grandparents lose retirement funds or certainly delay their retirement, right, plans. We were gonna buy the house, we're not gonna buy the house. Things like that. And really the summation here is, and why this matters, they're wired to be financially anxious, okay? That is very clear to us. Vigilant at best, anxious at worst, okay? So what did we learn though from the GI generation? Well, if we go back to history and say, all right, well, they were really impacted by the Depression, what did we learn about how they spent or didn't spend? One very quick way to do that would be look at the personal consumption expenditure number, right? And what we're looking at here is the percent of the economy. So the long-range average of consumption as a percent of our economy for 87 years, call it like since Jesus left, right, is 64%. That's where you kind of get the random like 2/3 number that people talk about, 2/3 of the economy, right, are consumer. Shaded here, if you can see it, almost the entire duration of the GI generation when they were in their adult consumption years, 25 to 65, the 40 years that they were in their adult consumption years, earning income and spending, they were below average. So we think this does matter to pay attention to how GI generation acted. They didn't just have like a couple tough years, like they had a whole mindset shift for 4 decades about spending less relative to the average. So that's what you're seeing there. So could it happen to millennials? Maybe it's super early. So that peak population of millennials in their adult consumption years, they just started in 2015, like that big bulk of them, right? Which also lines up with why consumer spending might have been breaking down relative to consumer confidence over the last 2 years. An early sign. George, you had a question?
Yeah, did you normalize that for the impact of overall population number changes? Because, as the population shifts in absolute terms, that's going to have an impact on the percentage that any portion of the population impacts overall GDP.
So this would be apples to apples in terms of how we're looking at it, spending to economy. So one is influenced differently versus the economy, or versus population. They're both treated equally in that setup. Yeah. But I love that you question the data. That's good. Like, everyone needs to be questioned. No, absolutely. Yeah, this is, and then it's real GDP and real, consumption. So we've inflation adjusted it too, right? So I mean, we've tried to make it as realistic to an apples to apples view of the consumption base of the economy. All right, so early signs that maybe millennials are headed in that same direction. It's again a little bit too early to tell, like in the big overview data of economy, right? However, if we were to categorize all of the different 66 categories of retail sales, okay, there's like 66 different categories, GICS classifications and things like that, and start bucketing them out, like, okay, grocery are needs, right? Department stores are wants. Okay, if you start doing that for all 66 categories, you are seeing a slight shift towards more needs-based retailers versus wants-based retailers. It's small, it's 100 basis points, right? But again, we're just beginning the peak population entering into adult consumption years. So to be determined, but it certainly feels like that's what's a brewing. So you woke up this morning, the sun was out, the birds were singing, and you're like, yay, I get to go see an economic presentation, and I've depressed the heck out of you. Okay, where's the hope? Where's the hope? There is hope, actually. I always think there's hope in just better understanding the why behind things, because if you understand the why, you can actually create action plans and think through that in your business. So a lot of applications to this if we're right. So let me just walk you through our kind of high-level take. This is not comprehensive by any stretch. This just gives you a peek into kind of how we think through things. Frugal consumers will still consume because there's consumption that needs to be done, right? So that's the good first news. Frugal consumers will still consume. They just may consume differently and for different reasons. We do think, though, that behind it, with that lens of financial anxiety and financial vigilance, we might need a mindset shift a little bit around empathy, right? Understanding a little bit why millennials are wired the way that they are to get them over some of those humps. We think that empathy could be part of it. So let's just walk through one demographic trend where we think could kickstart some consumption, right? Where's my real estate guy? There you are, there you are. There, we got some real estate people. Okay, cool. So millennial household formation, probably one of the best demographic trends coming your way. They are getting married, they are having babies, they are buying houses, sometimes in that order, sometimes not in that order. I don't know, but what I do know is there's a lot of them. What you're looking at here is the US population cut for just 20 to 29-year-olds, right? This was me in that bucket when there was like nobody, 16 million of us, right, in that bucket or so. And now there's Kayla up there at the peak. There's 20 million of them. So you have 25% more people today in that 20 to 29 age range than you did back in 2000. That's a lot of people that can kind of come and start household formation. Why does household formation matter? Because you buy a house and you fill it with things. Things are consumption. Okay, so this is all really good. This is actually, there's some hope to this. This is a big demographic trend that can happen. But it's not happening as fast as we want it to happen, right? So why aren't they buying homes as much as we want them to? Let's tackle the myth a little bit. I frequently hear, millennials are too lazy to leave their parents' houses. I am hopeless as a mother. I'm like mother of an 11-year-old prince. I don't want him to ever leave, okay? I'm like making sure my house is super fun and he stays forever. So I don't understand this myth. No, it's true. So are they lazy? Are they? Are they afraid? Maybe to leave the nest of safety? A little bit of a different question. Are they capable? They have a lot of student debt now, right? Are they capable? Or are they actually smarter than all of us because they know how to save all of their dollars for, Just you probably support one. I see a head nod over there, right? They are smarter than all of us, right? They figured out how to not pay rent. Okay, so this is just an example of walking through a typical myth that we hear, but reframing it with some insights as well as some empathy. They're financially anxious, but is that all that's going on? We obviously discussed the student debt component. We think there's actually another big issue, so hopefully real estate guys can figure this out. Please, Tim.
Some of my customers were saying when they interview people in this age group, they feel entitled or you hear some of that. I don't know if that plays into this at all.
Yeah, I think we should add one of those myth exercises on the entitled side. I'll come back to you in just or did you want to comment on the entitlement side?
I'm going to add a sort of
Sure, go for it.
to that. And also Freddie and Fannie, 18 months ago, changed mortgage underwriting standards with how they treat student loan debt. So it is really difficult to get qualified for a loan if you have student loan debt.
Yeah. Ironically, the government originates 90% of all student loans. So it's funny that they're actually kind of like creating the problem and then also not solving the problem. But I might have spoken a little bit out of turn on that one. And I'm going to come back to this.
Just from experience, are the millennials more not fans of being financially leveraged? They hate debt, so they're not going to buy a home until their student loans are gone, or they're not going to move in with someone to buy a home together until they can do it more leveraged. I know a lot of people that it is a very good idea to have a low cash requirement life while your expenses may be lower. If you have a giant debt payment, like a house mortgage, all of a sudden, if you're out of a job and you have a lower income, you are out of funds that's going to start eating your nest egg. Whereas other generations might say, hey, we'll just get a loan or whatever.
Yeah. Can I get to this question and then, or are you adding to this?
Can I add this?
Yeah, please do.
My question is it job security? Because I feel like previously people got a job, bought the house, knew their income was going to grow, wasn't worried about losing their, and so then you have people who go, forget having a mortgage, because if I lose my job, I won't be able to, and then I'll lose my home, and I watch people do that, right?
Correct.
So that's my question is, does it really come back to job security?
It does, and I'll tell you why. One of our primary tenets of our belief system at Distill is the consumer is first the laborer. You cannot disaggregate these two. You have to look at what's going on with your labor force before you can possibly understand what's going on with your consumer force. Because you are first a laborer and then you're a consumer. So I think job security is part of it. I think you're completely spot on. But I do want to address the entitled piece. We do hear that often. And I've certainly been in interviews where I'm like, okay, this is over in about 30 seconds. Okay, so I know. And I clearly found like the least amount of entitled one right here. So I think it probably has just more of they want to know what's certain versus uncertain. There's a certainty component of entitlement that if you start thinking through, why would someone even be asking this, right? It could be that they just want to know certainty. So I do want to just fast forward just a little bit so I can, well, so I think, Tim, if I'm understanding you correctly, maybe you want to answer that.
Yeah, the feeling, well, I deserve X wages, or I deserve this many weeks of vacation right off the bat. Or I think my generation was just thankful to have that second job to be able to pay my bills, and I'll work my way up.
Right. It's just a different frame of perspective in how people value their time. But again, I think that component of certainty and financial anxiety gets weighed into there. I'm not saying you yield to it entirely. I'll actually give you guys one pragmatic suggestion right now that we're talking about in the C-suite. Courtesy, actually, Kayla's recommendation, which has been a fun one to recommend. This is why you partner generationally, okay? Diversity isn't just about female and male and ethnicity. It's about having generational diversity, okay? Keep this in mind, people. That's your takeaway today. We're recommending people to look into whether or not they should even do 401k matches, which may mean nothing to someone who saw a stock market fall apart, right? And retirements fall apart, and speak to them more directly about maybe that 401k match should be student debt reduction. Think about that from a retention perspective, right? If that's the number one thing going on from their minds and their concerns, you can allay those concerns, not even by weeks of vacation. We're going to help you pay down your student debt. Think about that. It's a new benefit, something new to kind of think through. So that's one thing that we're recommending right now in the C-suite. All right, so the punchline to this on home ownership and supply, I think most people kind of know this, especially in our market. There are only 1.9 million homes in the US right now available for a lot of buyers, including 1.7 million of them are looking to buy in the ages of 25 to 39. There's a supply-demand issue going on with also millennials finding homes that are buyable. There's a lot of them and very few homes. So I'm just gonna fast forward here and get to our Q&A. I think are we okay on time a little bit? Or how much time do we have, Chum, for questions? We're out. Okay, sorry, we're out. I took the questions during the presentation, I guess, is what we did. So that's all right. No, it's good. We're available. Kayla and I will hang around a little bit if anyone wants to talk. But thank you very, very much. Word to still. Thank you.